Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. We begin in the Northwest Territories, where nearly 100 job cuts could hit the territorial government. The announcement came this morning when the government tabled the first operating budget of this assembly. The NWT Finance Minister says this budget is all about saving money to make sure the territory can handle the unexpected. The CBC's Natalie Pressman has been diving into the details. She joins us now with more. So Natalie, let's start with those job cuts. What do we know?
Well, this budget suggests cutting 91 public service jobs, and about a third of those positions are already vacant. So it would actually be 58 staff positions that would be cut. Department of Finance staff couldn't say where those jobs might come from. The budget still has to be discussed in the legislature and then voted on, so those numbers could change. The Fort Smith Correctional Complex is another area the government is talking about cutting to save money. They're suggesting closing down the men's unit to free up about $2.7 million. But Finance Minister Caroline Wozniak talked about turning that facility into a wellness center. She says she doesn't yet know what that's going to look like, but she says she doesn't want this big facility and trained staff to go to waste.
So are there any other ways that the government is planning to save money, Natalie?
Yes, there are a few sort of smaller ways that they talked about. One is printing less paper, and they say that'll save about $300,000. Another is spending less on office leases. $1.6 million is expected to be saved there. So there's small cuts, but those things add up.
Absolutely, yeah, they start to add up when you are looking at such a big number. So what about trying to get more revenue? Is the NWT looking at doing anything to increase its revenue?
Yes, so the majority of the money that comes into the Northwest Territories comes from the feds, and that's where most of the revenue increase is coming from too. So the federal government is increasing its contribution to the non-insured health benefits program, and the territory is also getting a chunk of money back from projects that aren't going to be completed. So overall, all of that frees up about $100 million. And that's still $50 million short of the territory's goal. But Wozniak says that's okay because, they're cutting where they can, but they're not just making cuts for the sake of it.
When you were diving into all of this, what really stood out for you?
Yes, well, I was struck by the fact that this budget only has about $22 million for wildfire suppression. And for reference, last year the NWT spent $150 million for wildfire suppression. But, like you said at the beginning, Wozniak is selling this budget as preparing the territory to deal with the unexpected. So she says they want to be able to allocate the surplus, where it might be needed.
So I think the idea here of being sustainable and having a sustainable budget is not trying to, shake the magic 8-ball and know exactly which disaster, challenge, or emergency might befall us, but to realize that increasingly, whether it's climate change extremes or otherwise, we need to be better prepared and have that fiscal capacity. So,
what happens next then, Natalie?
Well, now the MLAs will discuss the proposed plan in the legislature. And it's worth mentioning that the government of the Northwest Territories and the union are currently negotiating a new collective agreement. So, of course, salary negotiations will have an impact on the territory spending too. And then before the end of this spring session, MLAs will put the budget to a vote.
Okay, thanks for digging into all this for us, Natalie. That's the CBC's Natalie Pressman on the territory's proposed budget that was tabled today in the legislature. Reactions to that budget came swiftly. Some like it, others don't, especially the Union of Northern Workers. It says the proposed 91 job cuts will be devastating to those who are terminated.
What are our members going to do about their mortgages, right? How can they afford to feed their families now? So they're pushing their responsibility onto the federal government. EI is not going to feed a family of 4 or 5, especially not in this economy that was generated by this.
Not everyone, though, is disappointed with the new budget. Yellowknife Mayor Rebecca Alty says there's a lot that she's happy to see, including $1.6 million for transitional housing for people in addictions treatment and an extra $2 million for the RCMP.
Happy to hear they're looking at all the different resources and assets they have and seeing how they can be best used, because we definitely need the focus on the addictions, the housing, to address some of the public safety concerns.
When asked if she's worried about the proposed job cuts, Alti says she'll have to wait and see if they'll impact Yellowknife's economy. The government of Nunavut has reached an interim deal with Indigenous Services Canada over non-insured health benefits. The $190 million agreement will help offset rising costs when it comes to medical travel for Inuit. The deal is retroactive to April 1st, 2023 and lasts for 2 years. Nunavut Health Minister John Main says this money is necessary because medical travel expenses go up every year.
We're fully committed to making sure that Nunavut Inuit health needs are taken care of and that they have access to the specialized care they need. And this new funding agreement is a big part of that, because when we no longer have that funding gap where the Indigenous Services is funding the program as it should be, we can take that additional funding from our own coffers and put it towards other areas of the healthcare system, because we need more services, we need more equipment, facilities, so it's a positive development for Nunavut healthcare.
Main says the Department of Health is already working on the next deal with the federal government. An $890,000 budget shortfall has led to the cancellation of 18 training programs in Nunavut's Family Services Department. That is according to Minister Margaret Nakashuk. She says the shortfall is due to $625 million in cuts to labor market transfers as part of this year's federal budget. The transfers provide money to provinces and territories for skill development training.
The Government of Canada is hindering the ability of Nunavut to contribute fully to the economy, perpetuating unemployment, underemployment, cycles of poverty, and limiting our progress towards a more equitable and prosperous society. They are sending us backwards in time.
Nakashuk says provincial and territorial labor ministers want that funding reinstated, and they've called for a meeting with the federal Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Official Languages. Scott Halla will serve a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years for the murder of Emerald McDonald. The sentence was handed down in a Kugluktuk courtroom this morning. McDonald's body was found outside a cabin near Kugluktuk in May of 2021. She was an actress best known for her role in The Grizzlies, a 2018 film about a lacrosse team in the community. Halla was arrested and charged with first-degree murder shortly after. Crews are working to protect the NWT's 60th Parallel Visitor Center as a wildfire close to the Northwest Territories' Alberta border moves north. This is what drivers saw on Highway 1 on Thursday. The fire is now 300 meters from the highway. It flared up yesterday, pushing it towards the NWT and prompting crews to set up sprinklers at the 60th Parallel Visitor Center, which greets drivers as they cross into the Northwest Territories from Alberta. Alberta Wildfire has been taking the lead on this fire. It estimates it's now 14,000 hectares. NWT Fire says Highway 1 could close with little to no notice and that drivers should expect heavy smoke in the area. There's one new fire burning in Wood Buffalo National Park. Parks Canada says it's a holdover fire that was discovered during a whooping crane survey flight. It's 6 kilometers northwest of the Little Buffalo Bridge and about 2 hectares big. Now, smoke might be visible along Highway 5 in the NWT, but Parks Canada says there's no risk to the highway or any communities at the moment. And in the Yukon, Old Crow is no longer under an evacuation alert and no longer at risk of major flooding. Parts of the community have been under evacuation alert for the past week as the Porcupine River rose. It's been dropping all week and has now been downgraded from a flood watch status to a high stream flow advisory. Nunavut will soon be harvesting more energy from the sun once the town is connected to a new solar panel array. It was built by Nitat Energy Limited. It's the 4th solar installment the community has built in Nunavut. Once it's done, it'll deliver 1 megawatt of energy into the community grid.
adding additional generation in Nunavut. That's our largest diesel-consuming community during normal times. Adding 4.5 megawatts of renewable power over the past year between the wind turbine and now the solar array is, good news for the planet.
The solar panels store energy in a system of batteries that help keep power stable when the system switches back and forth from wind to diesel. The work is happening between May 25th and June 7th, and TPC doesn't expect any major outages during that time. A vet shortage in the Yukon means animal owners need to get creative when faced with an emergency, and that's what happened last week in Haines Junction. A farmer was struggling to deliver a calf, and the closest vet was busy in Whitehorse. Beth Dean tells us what happened.
Natasha Chatterton says that on Sunday, she noticed her dairy cow behaving strangely. Later that day, the cow, named Tori, stopped standing. When she realized Tori was facing a risky birth, Chatterton called a vet. A dispatcher at the vet's office in Whitehorse relayed advice because the vet was dealing with another emergency.
We were anticipating that we were pulling out a dead baby. It was really hard, super emotional.
The baby was born alive, but struggling to breathe and unable to eat. Sandy Secord drove to the farm to set the calf up with a feeding tube. The retired vet technician says she's continuing to help and keep in touch with vets back in Whitehorse.
Vets, they work hard and they try to accommodate everything, but it's not always feasible.
Chatterton says she's grateful for all the support that both her cow and calf have received, and she's considering getting more veterinary training herself. Mary Beth Dean, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Climate change is having an increasingly large impact on our natural world. In Alberta, biologists at the Beaver Hill Bird Observatory have been studying birds for the past 40 years, and they've recently discovered a change in many of their wings that could be connected to our shifting climate. Our colleagues in Edmonton stopped by to find out what was going on.
There's been lots of activity this morning. We're at the Beaver Hill Bird Observatory, and we're just going out to check our nets. We have 17 nets up right now, and we check them every half an hour to see what birds we catch. Oh, we got a bird. So they usually don't get very tangled. It only takes us a few seconds to get them out. This net, when it's open, is really hard to see. It's called a mist net, and it's a really fine, delicate nylon material. So when they're flying through the forest, they don't see it. They hit the net, fall into this loose pocket here, and then they just hang out like they're hanging out in a hammock. And then we come check the nets every 30 minutes and pull everything out that's in them, and it only takes us usually a few seconds. They're not very tangled at all.
We have a standard number of mist nets. We keep them open for 6 hours, and we look at the birds that we catch day to day, and that allows us to describe the migration through the season, and then we do it the same protocol year after year, so then we can look at population changes.
We catch them, study them, and then release them, and hopefully we catch them along the way or somebody else does.
Once we catch the birds, we weigh them. So by doing it systematically, if there are changes in weights, we can document that. We look at the ages and sexes of them. How has that changed? We measure the wing length, the tail length. We just did an analysis of 30 years of our information. The wings of most of our small birds, the passerines, are getting longer. It's only a millimeter, but because we've banded so many birds, it's a significant change. And one wonders why. Well, that's what's predicted by climate change. The air is generally warmer. That means it's less dense. So to fly and have the same wing loading, you need bigger wings. So there's a lot of physical characteristics that we can track on these birds. But on top of that, by inviting the public, they get to see what science is about. So part of that is getting them to have the experience here, create the awareness that there are issues, and then have a conservation action when they get home and moving forward.
We're in a provincial recreation area, so it's open to the public all year round. When the snow gets too deep, we can't get into site, so we close down and run an education program. But in the spring, summer, and fall, we're out here just catching birds and doing our research.
Hi, I'm Abel. I often forget to mention that he's an amputee because Abel will try any activity he can.
My arm helps me with basically everything.
He doesn't see what he can't do, he sees what he can do.
Yeah, this is helping.
The War Amps has just given him the ability to do all the activities every kid can do.
When you donate to the War Amps, you help kids like me. Thank you.
Makimuksak palilaw da aula yina po kugyang mulo amalo kok biu yamo kinga diwaling mulo pangolo asyang miu muna toy mo ina daile tak pa makimuksak palilaw sumo mutay mabuat taling ni pilariyo lak sumo inyo ami chwalu walang mata.
When we see Team Canada on the world stage, we're witnessing pure greatness. What we don't see is their struggle. We don't see Maggie McNeil navigating her anxiety, Shea Gilgis-Alexander getting cut from his high school team, or Ellie Black hearing she's just too old to compete. What we don't see makes us who we are. We're all bravely facing the odds in our lives, and our bravery is our victory.
Everyone listen up.
Bursting with labor.
All these guys 21?
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Owning an NHL team.
Penguins had us review your offer, and it looks good.
Wow.
Get me on the phone with Cops Coliseum. Tell them I want to buy it.
The RCMP has added a traditional Indigenous ribbon skirt to its uniform. Commissioner Mike Duhem says officers can now wear them when donning the traditional red uniform. The move is meant to demonstrate the force's commitment to reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion. But as Cameron McIntosh reports, not everyone is happy with the decision.
As Canadian a symbol as it gets, the RCMP's red surge. This week, the dress uniform got an addition. A ribbon skirt featuring 4 colors representing 4 directions, after a push by female Indigenous members and elders, including Judy Pelly.
It really signifies how we have pride in our womanhood, in our, being matriarchs of our communities.
Ribbon skirts are seen by many Indigenous nations as a symbol of identity. For the RCMP to adopt it is upsetting to some. Upset over the role of red-clad Mounties in settling Western Canada and residential schools. At this march in Winnipeg for residential school survivors, strong feelings.
We need to focus on the justice and the truth and reconciliation, which I don't believe the RCMP has done to date.
I think that's an insult to our people because they're the ones that snatched us away.
But not everyone here feels that way.
Represents the women and how we're just growing stronger.
The push for an RCMP skirt came after RCMP officers gave a ribbon skirt they made to a young Saskatchewan girl shamed at school for wearing hers. Pelly is that girl's grandmother.
It gave us a sense of pride for who we are and as women.
In a lengthy statement, the RCMP said it consulted Indigenous staff and advisors. The RCMP also permits Indigenous officers to take an oath on an eagle feather and wear Métis sashes. Sandra Delarond has consulted with the RCMP on issues including missing and murdered women and girls. She gets the concern, but also sees it like this.
The RCMP doesn't own the ribbon skirt. It's owned by the members that wear it.
The RCMP says there are about 300 Indigenous members of the force eligible to wear the skirt, as conversation around it underscores the complexities of reconciliation. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
If you have a child on one or more wait lists for daycare, you're far from alone. Data collected by CBC News indicates that demand is sky high across the country for $10 a day childcare. Providers are calling for more funding because their operating costs are rising and demand for daycare is outstripping supply. Marina von Stackelberg has the story.
Sherry Rieger's daughters are on 15 childcare waitlists. The family, like many across Canada, is struggling to find a licensed provider.
Some of them are saying that we won't have a spot for 2 or 3 years.
It's been 2 years since the federal government signed its last deal with provinces to spend tens of billions of dollars to create more childcare spots and eventually cut fees parents pay to $10 a day. Daycares have overwhelmingly taken part, and that has caused growing pains.
As childcare has become more affordable, we hear from parents that want to access it, that are having trouble finding spaces.
Providers say they are struggling to operate the spots they already have. The funding hasn't kept up with inflation and the need to pay childcare workers a livable wage.
We do need to take into consideration those costs, and those will only increase as the demand goes up.
As part of the deal, daycares also can't raise their fees, an option they had in the past to offset costs. Some private childcare centres in Ontario who can access those public dollars have threatened to pull out of the program altogether unless they get more money.
The funding will have to rise across the whole sector, but it is not coincidental that this game of chicken is not being played by anybody other than the for-profit sector.
It's hard to know exactly how many childcare spaces are needed. Each daycare has its own waitlist and many families are on multiple. But the latest data from Statistics Canada shows half of Canadian families now report struggling to find a spot.
The funding is great. It's a great incentive to get us moms back out to work. But again, if I can't access it, what is the point?
To add to Sherry's anxiety in finding daycare, she's expecting her third child this fall. That baby doesn't have a name yet, but is already on a wait list. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Senate Committee on Fisheries and Oceans has released new recommendations for the seal industry in a report called Sealing the Future, a Call to Action. It says the federal government must take steps to ensure a healthy seal population. And it also presented a variety of recommendations, including setting up a national and international campaign to help bring Canadian seal products to new markets around the world. The committee chair says these recommendations will offer the industry an equal place alongside other food markets.
If what has been done to the sealing industry in our country, in our particular case, Newfoundland and Labrador, was happening to the beef or the chicken or the pork industry in Canada, everybody will be up in arms, beating the drum on what we need to do. We're not asking for special treatment here for the sealing industry, the fishing industry. We're asking for equal treatment.
The report says a strong sealing industry would greatly benefit Canada's Indigenous communities and improve local economies. Younger voters came out in record numbers in 2015 to help Justin Trudeau win a majority government. But since then, their support for the Liberals has faded. Millennial and Gen Z voters could make up close to half of the electorate in the next campaign. And that has the Prime Minister and members of his caucus trying to find new ways to win them back. Ashley Burke has that story.
Just try to come around further away from the camera.
These Gen Z staffers work for Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault, but in this case, they're calling the shots.
And then am I smiling or am I just walking by you?
I'm going to say with confidence you're walking away.
They're directing social media videos that could hit with millennials and Gen Z like this. I'm working late. The Liberals have heard from young Canadians they want authentic politicians. This is one way they're trying to win trust.
Got to have some videos that are fun, that maybe are edgy, but that also say to people, I'm real.
It's all part of a new push to reach younger voters. Mary Ng bought her own drone to bring on international trips. MP Nate Erskine-Smith just hired a filmmaker to produce his content.
It's answering the questions that they have, speaking to the issues that they have on platforms that they are on.
Trudeau's Liberals need to win the support of Canada's largest voting demographic or risk losing the next election.
Right now, the Liberals are in the worst position they've been in with millennial voters and Gen Z voters.
That support, he says, drifted to the Conservatives, who are reaching them where they get their news, on social media, and talking about their issues.
You want to be able to afford rent? Then you have to vote for Pierre Poilievre.
In the last year, the Liberals have pivoted with housing announcements and a budget focused on younger Canadians.
To ensure fairness for every generation.
But how do you get that message to younger voters who don't watch traditional news?
We got to meet Canada's Deputy Prime Minister.
Talk to content creators, including Danica Nelson. She says creators like her with thousands of followers are a way to reach this generation.
They want to meet people where they are, and they know that people are on social media.
Wait, don't scroll. This is important.
The Prime Minister's office is also sharpening its social media game, doing more interviews with podcasters and making more videos explaining policy.
You may have heard of the capital gains tax.
That video getting millions of views, but whether that translates into trust and votes is too early to tell. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Oilers fans are celebrating tonight after Edmonton won the first game of the NHL Western Conference Final yesterday. They beat the Dallas Stars 3-2 in double overtime. Game 2 will be played in Dallas tomorrow. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a great weekend.
When we see Maggie McNeil, she's an Olympic gold medalist gliding through the pool. What we don't see is a person who refuses to let anxiety keep her from the starting block. When we see Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, the man's unstoppable. What we don't see is a skinny kid who got cut from his high school team. We don't see Maud Sharon being forced to change weight classes after she won Olympic gold. Ellie Black hearing she's just too old to compete as she prepares for her 4th Olympic Games. Or Andre DeGrasse dealing with all the doubters, including himself. What we don't see makes these athletes who they are. What we don't see makes us all who we are. We're all bravely facing the odds in our lives, and our bravery is our victory.
We fight the best we can.
One of these days we're gonna have to grow up, but today is not that day.
I don't want us to get older either.
Son of a Critch. Watch free on CBC Gem.
So you want to watch CBC News Explore, a new kind of news channel. Well, here's one way to find us. We're on CBC Gem. Stream anytime for free. CBC News Explorer.